And thanks everybody for all joining this call on the most miserable sort of weather day, isn't it? It's untrue. But anyway, we're really pleased to be doing this afternoon, and there's a bit of a sort of history to why we're doing this event. Julie, who is the senior D&I manager at Homes England, called me out on something in that we'd actually, as Real Estate Balance, put an invitation out to something, or had invited people to participate in a survey. And she called me out and said that we were using the wrong vocabulary, the wrong language. And I said, right, well, you know, mea culpa. But if that's the case, you should be telling us what we should be doing and what language we should be using. And Julie then did a couple of sessions for us for Real Estate Balance. And we had every single one of our board members on that session. And we had all of our members of our Next Gen committee on that session. And everyone thought it was such a good session that we should actually share it with members. Julie did those sessions for us based very much on what she was saying about gender, but we sort of realised that if we were going to do this, we also needed to talk, you know, have somebody on who could talk about race and ethnicity as well. So I'm absolutely delighted to introduce Julie today, and also to introduce Michelle. Michelle has had 15 years experience in social value and CSR in the private and public sector. And she obviously, you know, is completely passionate about making a lasting and meaningful impact in the community. She's a member of Black Professionals in Construction, and in that role, you know, believes that social value and CSR can really be a major catalyst for social change. Julie, I've not introduced to you in quite the same way, because you're such an integral part of my life now, of Real Estate Balance's life. As I say, Senior Diversity Manager at Homes England. And I do hope that you enjoy this afternoon. What we're going to try and do is keep the sort of presentation part of it to about 3/4 of an hour, and then you know, have time for questions. And if people want to put questions on the, you know, the question sort of bit, we'll deal with those as and when. But thanks so much for joining us. And Julie and Michelle, I'm going to pass over to you. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Sue, and hi everybody. Great to see so many people here. And so as Sue said, my name's Julie Musasolu. My pronouns are she and her. I'm the Diversity Inclusion Manager at Homes England. I also lead an external LGBT network in Manchester called LGBT Property Professionals, and I'm involved in Building Equality, which is an LGBT alliance of organisations looking to sort of improve diversity and inclusion within the construction industry. Hand over to you, Michelle, to introduce yourself.
Oh, yeah, just unmuted. Hello, everyone. I'm Michelle Seal, as Julie stated. I've worked in social value for a long time now, and as part of that role have been sort of instrumental in sort of driving in diversity and inclusion within the organisations as well that I work. So really excited to be here to talk to you a bit about our experiences and some of the things that we've come across in that sector as well, and some of the things that maybe will help the language that we use going forward to make everything inclusive. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Excellent. Thank you. So just to give you a bit of an overview of what we're going to be covering, there'll be a sort of brief introduction. This is kind of part of it. We'll be going back to basics, really. It's looking at what we mean by the words when we talk about equality, diversity, inclusion, and belonging. We'll then be doing a bit of a deeper dive into inclusive language with a bit of a focus on gender and ethnicity in particular, and why it's important to just be aware of the language that we're using. We're then going to give a bit of an update and sort of delve a bit into understanding unconscious bias and intersectionality a little bit more, and then we will go on to what you can all do, or what we can do as a collective. So just as a bit of an intro, as we're going, please feel free to sort of post in the chat, introduce yourself, tell us who you are, where you're joining from, stuff like that. But I'll crack on whilst that's going on. And just as well, before we start, I thought this is quite important to sort of set some ways of working out, really. So this can be quite a sensitive topic for some people, so just want to sort of clarify that this is a safe space. It's important that, you know, confidentiality, trust, openness, honesty are all important. There will be a couple of interactive elements, so please do join in if you feel comfortable doing so. And I think it's just really important to note that we're all at different levels. I suppose there's some people will know more than others in terms of this topic. Sue, Michelle and I were discussing the other day actually that we're not coming here with all the answers, and actually in some cases there's not always right and wrong answers, so we're here to give our perspectives and to open up I guess a broader discussion for you to then take away into your own organisations. So we shall kick off. So first of all, as I mentioned, I just want to go right back to the start and talk about what we mean. We use these words or these terms quite a lot. Some terms are used more than others. There's always new language coming into play in this this area of work as well. So I thought it'd be just good to describe what we mean by the terms equality, diversity, inclusion, and belonging. So starting with equality. So by equality, it's ensuring that everyone's got the same resources and the same opportunities, and that ultimately nobody is treated differently because of any protected characteristic or any part of their identity that they may have. Diversity, when we talk about diversity, we're talking about the actual mix of people that we've got round. So diversity is a fact, basically. It's, you know, the different mix of people that we've got around the table, or in our organisations or communities. When we talk about inclusion, that's making sure that this different mix that we talk about in diversity, that they're being valued, that they're being accepted and welcomed and treated fairly. Sorry, I'm getting pop-ups with people entering. I'm just going to try and move this. And belonging is the feeling, the true feeling of being part of something. So I think it's quite important to note that these can exist on their own. So you can have equality without being diverse. You can make sure that people are having the same opportunities, and you're treating people the same, but you can still have sort of a group of very, very similar people around the table. You can have diversity without inclusion. So just because you've got a good mix of people in your organisation or within society, if they aren't working together and respecting and welcoming each other, then you've not got an inclusive environment, even though you may have a diverse environment. And you can have inclusion without belonging. So you might tolerate people, you might have people where you listen to their ideas, but without them really feeling that they're a part of the organisation and that they truly belong, then it's still not good enough. So belonging is really, all of them are very, very important, and belonging is what we're striving for and what we should get when you put all of the others together. I'm just going to touch on equality a little bit more though. So I've mentioned that it's around basically treating people the same regardless of who they are. And that's not actually always the right thing to do. What we should really be aiming for is equity. So as you can see from the image, if you treat everybody the same, and it's something that a lot of people say to me, a lot of people say, oh, I'm all for diversity and inclusion, I just treat everyone the same, it doesn't matter to me. Actually, there's some people that need to be treated differently in order to be able to get the same outcome. So as you can see there, if you give 3 people of different sizes the same box, so that they can watch a game, that's not good enough. We're still not giving them all the same opportunity to watch that game. What we need to do is tailor what we do for different individuals according to their specific needs. So hopefully that makes sense. Shout out if not. I'm just going to go on to why it is important. So I'm sure a lot of you know this already, but diversity, inclusion, equality, diversity, inclusion and belonging are all really, really important to society, to the organisations that we work in, and definitely to the sector that we work in as well. So we as a sector want to attract and retain the best talent. if we're not inclusive, then we're not going to do that. If we're not reaching out to and welcoming of people from different backgrounds, then we're massively missing out. We perform better when we can be ourselves at work. So if you feel like you really belong, if you can bring your whole self to work, then organisations are going to get more out of you. Having different perspectives, different mix of people around the table will result in increased creativity, innovation, better problem solving, better decision making. I think organisations definitely have got a role to play in influencing others as well. So from Homes England's point of view, we've got quite a big supply chain across the industry. So we want to be able to use what we're doing to influence others. And I think really importantly, we need an industry or a sector that reflects and understands the needs of the diverse communities that we serve. So that's a bit of an intro from me. I'm going to hand over to Michelle, who is going to do a bit of a deeper dive into really inclusive language and why that's important.
Hey, thanks, Julie. So yeah, I suppose one of the really key things is around the language that we use and how it can be quite hurtful in some cases. I just to sort of start this, to give you an example of something that happened recently, funnily enough to me. And I was actually with a colleague, and I'd actually had hair is another issue. I won't go into that now, but I had my hair in braids at the time, and the colleague turned around to me and said, "Oh, I don't like your hair in braids. You look like this other lady who had dreadlocks." And I was just, first of all, dumbfounded, because I just thought, what you just said? You realise what you've just said? But she was saying it in a way that she didn't think it was offensive at all, that she was just complimenting me in the fact that she didn't like my hair in braids, she preferred it another way, but at the same time didn't realise the negative connotations around what she was saying. So although what we're trying to say here is, we're not trying to say, it's often not deliberate, the language that is used. It's often not said to cause offence, but it can cause offence and cause harms in ways that we're not aware of. So it's just being really inclusive with the language. That means just making sure that we seek to include as many people as possible in the words that we use and the words that we say. So things, avoiding terms like man and mankind, instead using things like humankind, for example. So when we use the language, it's a way of making sure people feel included, so they don't feel like isolated in any way by the terminologies that we use. And often it will open up conversations to be more inclusive in the dialogues that we use. So I've got a video that I wanted to just share with you all. It is a bit of a comedy video, but I think it hits home quite nicely with the points. So if I let Judy play that for me, thank you.
Yeah, I'm hoping this works. If you can't hear anything, just shout or wave at me or something like that, but fingers crossed this works. Sorry, I'm just seeing it in the chat that, is there nothing showing for people here?
That's working fine.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. Sorry to cut in. Excellent.
We can't see it, I'm afraid, Julie, and I don't know whether it's just us now and everybody else can. It might be. It might be a firewall issue because of our kind of public sector nature. So, although Sam, I can see Sam Powell's on.
Yeah, I can't. Hi, Laura. No, I can't
Hi,
see
Sam.
it either. Hi.
It might be us. It might just be us, mightn't it?
DFE. Yeah. Perhaps you could send a link and we could try and work out how to watch it afterwards.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Brilliant.
We'll do that.
Thank you.
No worries. Sorry about that, everyone,
No
as well.
problem. Thanks.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. I know we had problems there, so I hope those that did see it, we'll send the link to those that haven't, and you can watch that in your own time. But it's quite a stark way of just sort of pointing out some of those languages. You know, where are you from? No, where are you really from? You know, the things that maybe everyday people say and don't realise the offence that it's causing. I'm just going to wait for the slides to come up again, Julie.
Sorry,
That's okay. That's okay.
I'm not sure what's going on here.
Leads quite nicely onto the next section around sort of microaggressions as well.
2 seconds. Sorry about this. They just disappeared. Oh, can't display content. Let me try it again.
I can see your housekeeping screen if that helps.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I can't. I can't see anything.
Move that on, Julie. I've managed to just move it on to microaggressions for you. So that's what we can see on the screen.
You can see microaggressions. I can't see anything.
I can't see that myself. Let me see.
We can't see that either. We can just see the housekeeping screen.
Yeah, I can. Laura.
Thanks, Sam.
It's always technology. Here we go. Wonderful.
Right.
Sorry about that.
Fantastic. Thank you. Can everyone see that now?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Microaggressions slide, yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I was saying that it kind of leads on to microaggressions, and I've just depicted some examples that you hear sometimes in the environment. If any of you have heard any more, please feel free to post them in the chat, examples of what microaggressions you have come across or maybe even used yourself in different ways as well. So the common one, it's probably one of my sort of ones I hear quite a lot. I don't see colour. You know, and I say, okay, what do you see? Or, you know, so it's these are things that we unconsciously say. You know, the definitions of it is it's subtle and it's unconscious and it's unintentional in a way it's meant, but it can marginalize people by the words that you use. And it's often in speech, but it's also in the behavior that you use. So the gestures that you use as well can often form those microaggressions as well. So to play this, I had another use. I'll use my own examples because they're only ones that I can use that will be, you know, relevant for this. But I can recall growing up, we actually moved to an area which was predominantly white at the time when I was at school in Milton Keynes. And I can remember our neighbours being the first Black family to particularly move into this area. And I can remember for several years of living there, there were certain neighbours that just were watching to see what our behaviours would be. And after about a couple of years living there, one particular lady, one of our neighbours that lived there, an elderly white lady it was in this particular incident. And she came to my mum and said, "Oh, your daughters are really well behaved." To which point my mum was like, "Would you not expect them to be?" You know, so it's just, you know, things that are not meant to cause offence that are really offensive, because why would we not be well-behaved children? Is it because of the colour of our skin that you're assuming, because of those stereotypes that you've seen, maybe, that we wouldn't be, you know? So it's all these things that we don't think consciously of, that we need to start thinking consciously of as well, you know? Things around, you know, asking people about, oh, your hair, it's versatile, etc., etc. Yes, it is great, but you know, would you ask that of someone else who wasn't maybe of my ethnicity, you know? Yeah, so it's just being conscious of the language we use. But I really would stress that it's also important, just if you're not sure, also ask the question as well, because often I find it's more offensive if you don't sometimes, and you're making those assumptions as well. One of the things, I don't know if anyone saw recently, there's a comedian, Wanda Sykes, if anyone knows Wanda Sykes, great American comedian, and she posted recently on LinkedIn. Obviously, we're all having wonderful weather right now, and she posted a comment on LinkedIn to say, one of the things that a Black person doesn't want to hear right now is, I'm nearly as Black as you, you know. You know, so it's really important, the language that we use, to be inclusive. I'm just talking about race and ethnicity in this case, but there are obviously examples about inclusive language around gender and disability that needs to be taken into account here as well. Next slide, please, Julie.
So I'm going to delve a little bit deeper into gender. So this is actually how so the thing that pulled Sue up on, or real estate balance up on, and we tend to talk about gender still in a very binary way, that you can be a man or a woman, and that's how you're born, and that's it. When actually sex, gender identity, gender expression are actually a lot more complicated than that. I really like this image to help explain it a little bit more. So there's probably some terms that you have heard. There's terms that are being used more common, and there's people being more open about their gender identity now than, say, 10 years ago. Although, you know, everyone has been around forever, really. But a lot of people might not fully understand what these mean. So first of all, there's sex and there's gender. So sex and gender are often terms that are used quite interchangeably, but are actually very different things and can be different to each other. So I'm going to start from the top. So gender or gender identity is really sort of what's in your mind. How do you feel? Your sense of self as a person. So some people, the terms that you'd use on either end of the spectrum for gender would be woman and man. And there are some people that feel 100% like a woman. There's some people that feel that they're 100% like a man, but then there's lots of people that find themselves either somewhere in between, or it could be that they sort of verge along the spectrum from side to side, and they might feel more man one day, more woman one day. They might find themselves somewhere in the middle. So sort of genderqueer or non-binary are terms often used for people whose gender doesn't fit in with the binary of man and woman. And there's also some people that don't see themselves as any gender at all, which agender is a term used a lot for them. So that's gender. That's your gender identities. You can express your gender in different ways, though. So you can express as feminine or masculine, or somewhere in between. Your gender identity and gender expression don't often always align. So I identify as a woman. My expression is probably fairly androgynous. I wear, shirts, jeans, trainers. I avoid dresses where possible. Well, always actually. So I wouldn't describe myself as feminine, even though I describe myself as a woman. You can also have people who are trans who may identify as a woman, however still express as a man, because they might not have transitioned yet. They might not feel comfortable to express as a true gender identity. So your gender identity is what's in your mind. Your gender expression is what you're putting out there to the world. Your biological sex is basically your sex characteristics. So again, this is more complicated than just female and male, but they're the two ends of the spectrum, I guess. So your biological sex is determined by a variety of things. So there's the obvious, what you've got between your legs, which is how a lot of doctors, hospitals, whatever, sort of determine somebody's sex when they're born. They'll have a look and say it's a boy or it's a girl. However, there's more sort of physiological reasons that make you a female or a male, and in some cases you can physically be something somewhere in between as well. So so you've got your chromosomes, so XX chromosomes or XY chromosomes. You've got your hormone levels, various different things. So there are some people, most people will be born and assigned female or male at birth, and that will be how they identify as well. There are some people whose it's not easy to determine what their physiological sex is, basically. So they might have male genitalia or female genitalia, but XY or XX chromosomes the opposite way around. So these people, you might have heard the term intersex. So that's where you've physically got a mixture of male and female sex characteristics. Again, there's lots of links between intersex people and gender identity. So as I mentioned, somebody will have a look between a baby's legs and say it's a boy or it's a girl, not taking into account, they don't check the chromosomes, they don't check the hormone levels. So actually, with a lot of intersex people that might have female hormones but male genitalia, they might actually identify as a woman but be assigned a male at birth. So again, lots and lots of links. They're all very different from each other. Slightly outside the gender side of it, but it's often connected, is your sexual orientation. So your sexual orientation is basically who you're sexually or romantically attracted to. Again, it's a spectrum. You've got heterosexual or straight on one side. You've got, it says the term homosexual there, which is actually a term that is not used very much, but you've gay on the other side, lesbian or gay. And then there's lots of other things in the middle. So bi, pansexual. So it's different to gender, but a lot of people get confused and think that if somebody's trans, they're also gay, for example. So it's just important to note that gender, the terms man and woman are just ones that we use all the time, so often. But it's not that simple. It's actually much more complex than that. We can't assume somebody's gender based on what we see. You can have all of these things on the screen separate from each other, and they're not related at all, but they do have impacts on each other. That's quite complicated, and I'm conscious that I've talked quite a lot on that. So I'm hoping it makes sense. Feel free to give a thumbs up or put in the chat if it does. If it doesn't, if there's any sort of immediate questions, I'm happy to take them now, or we can carry on. Cool. I'm seeing thumbs up. That's a positive sign. Okay, so I'm going to move on to pronouns. So I've mentioned that we really can't assume by looking at somebody what their gender is, and this is why pronouns are so important. So pronouns are basically, how we refer to other people or ourselves. So I mentioned at the beginning that my pronouns are she, her. I identify as a woman, and they're the pronouns that I prefer to use. If I was non-binary, then I may use the pronouns they, them. You might not know I'm non-binary if you don't know me and I've not disclosed that to you. So so sort of being open with the pronouns that you've got just makes it clear for other people, and also provides that really safe environment for people whose pronouns might be different to what you assume to be open and be able to be them true selves. So just some top tips for using pronouns. So I tend to, where possible, include my pronouns when introducing myself. I've got my pronouns on my email signature and my social media. So on LinkedIn, there's a new functionality actually where you can add your pronouns. I've got them on my sort of Twitter bio as well. It's important to sort of avoid sort of addressing groups with gendered language as well. So bearing in mind that some people are non-binary and don't identify as either a man or a woman, using terms such as ladies and gentlemen can be quite exclusive. So actually just using everybody or all when sort of referring to a group can be quite helpful. If you're not sure what someone's pronouns are, I think just ask, as Michelle said before. If questions are asked with good intentions and they're appropriate questions, then we don't mind. We'd rather people would rather be asked the question because somebody genuinely wants to get it right than to be misgendered or have wrong language used against them all the time. So if you do ask, then it's good to do that in a safe environment. But yeah, I always ask if you're not sure. And then if you accidentally misgender somebody, which you probably will do, so if somebody has got pronouns that are they, them, or if somebody's recently transitioned and you've known them expressing as a male, for example, in the transition to a woman, then it can be quite difficult to get used to. It can take some time to get your head around using pronouns that might not just feel natural to you. So I think it's important to note that mistakes will happen, and that's fine. If you do misgender someone or in any other sense sort of use the wrong language or terminology, the best thing to do is sort of just apologise, but move on. Don't make a big deal of it, and just try your best to get it right next time, basically. So some top tips in general, sort of just to summarise what Michelle and I have both said. I think avoiding gendered language where possible is the best. If you're not sure of how someone likes to be referred to as, and this goes beyond pronouns and gender, then just ask. That's probably the best way to do. Just ask somebody how they'd like to be referred to. It's important to note that there's some words out there that are acceptable for some people, but can also offend other people. So I think queer is a really good example of this. Queer is a term that was a really derogatory term against the LGBTQ community. It's now been reclaimed, and there's a lot of LGBTQ people referring to themselves as queer. I would really err with caution when using terms like that, and it'll be the same for other terms with other identities. So whilst you might have heard one person say it and it's acceptable to them, just bear in mind that there's some terms that can still be very offensive to other people, and if in doubt, leave it out is my advice to you there. I think when grouping people together, so we use a lot of acronyms, just in general and in diversity and inclusion as well. I think it's really important to remember to focus on each part of that sort of community individually. So there's a lot, Michelle, I don't know if you want to come in, there's a lot of talk around the term BAME or BAME at the moment, so it'd be good to get your insight on that.
Yeah, I was just thinking as you were talking that, there is and it's the personal opinion, I've never particularly identified with the term BAME, because I think it just tends to lump, as you said, a whole group of diverse people into one category, which is we are so different within that. So for me, there is discussion, and I always think it should be broken out into what it is. So Black, Asian, let's define exactly what it is rather than the terminology, because there are different experiences that we all have within that sector in terms of discriminative behaviour, for example. It's very, very different for each area and each individual within those characteristics. So yeah, I'm not an advocate for BAME. I'm an advocate for defining who we are.
Thank you. I think finally, whilst this is, a session on inclusive language and the importance of getting language right, I think, yes, it's massively important, but there's some things that, instead of getting so hung up about things, actually actions are more important than words. So, you know, we know that mistakes will happen. They will happen. We all make them. It's really, really important to try, but at the same time, there's no point in getting too overly hung up about the language if there's no action that's following it. So it's just, the words are important, but the action that you're taking is much more important. Okay, so that's sort of the inclusive language section of it. Hopefully you're also with us and it's making sense. I'm going to move on to unconscious bias, which is a term that most of you have probably heard of. A lot of you will know what it means, but I think it's something that's really important for us to all understand, because it's something that affects us all and something that we all have. So I'm going to play a short video, and then Michelle and I will go through how to manage the unconscious bias that we all have. So I'm hoping that this works. For those that it doesn't, I'll share this again. So apologies if you have to just sit and look at nothing for a couple of minutes, but fingers crossed you'll be able to see it. Have you all just lost it?
Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah,
It's just disappeared. I'm not sure what's going on. Sorry about this.
Well, Julie, let's send it afterwards if you like. I think that's.
Yeah. Can you see that?
We can see that. We can see housekeeper. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've got it back.
I'll give it one go. If it doesn't work, I'll move on, because it seemed to be the video last time that caused it to shut down. I love that video. Sorry to everyone that couldn't see that. I think there's been a few problems for a couple of people, but it gives me goosebumps every time. We'll share that again around to everyone so you can all access it. But I think it's a really good way of showing how unconscious bias manifests just day to day in society. I think Michelle gave a brilliant example before about people checking to see what your behavior would be like, probably because of the color of your skin. And it's something that we all actually do quite a lot unknowingly. A lot of the times we don't realize that we're doing it. So I'm going to sort of go into slight sciencey bit of why we do this, and then I'll hand over to Michelle who'll talk about what we can do about it. So unconscious biases, it's basically an automatic decision-making process within our brains. So our brains have got to process so many pieces of information every day that it is just too much for the conscious mind to be able to deal with. So what we do, and we do it a lot, as you can see from the image there, is that we take mental shortcuts. So we categorize people and things unknowingly, based on what we know, or what we think we know, or what we've heard, or how we were brought up. And we sort of put people into groups, into sort of in groups and out groups. And we can do that based on sort of several different things. It could be the way somebody looks, it could be the colour of their skin, it could be their accent. I think that's quite a common one, actually, that that happens quite a lot. It could be their faith, or their perceived faith. And without even realising it, our mind has put people into different groups, and that can really impact on how we treat people and on the decisions that we make as well. So as you can see, the majority of the time, the majority of the decisions that we're making are those fast, automatic, impulsive decisions that we've not actually really thought through, checked ourselves on. And it's actually only about 5% that are the analytical, thoughtful decisions where we've really took everything into consideration to make sure that we're doing the right thing, or saying the right thing, or making the right decision. So that's why we do it. It's, like I said, it's something that we all do. So I'm going to hand over to Michelle, who'll talk about it in a bit more detail.
Thanks. So yeah, so as Julie said, it's just to remember that it's really normal, first and foremost, that we all have them. We all have our biases, and they do inform our decision making every day in terms of what we do. And they often stem from childhood, you know, how you're raised as a child, you know. I personally was raised in, you know, a West Indian home. There were certain things that we were told as children. You know, we had quite a strict upbringing. You know, children of seen and not heard was our thing when we were growing up and younger. You know, it's how you were then interacting with the world. You know, so it's a bias that's formed as a child that you know just need to be conscious and aware of. And I think once you are aware of them, and you think about what your biases are, you can actually take a step back and actually think, actually, let me analyze and let me look at the situation in a different light. How, if I didn't have that bias, let me review it on what I actually see and ask questions about that, you know. So you don't just have your set in stone, this is the ideal of what I think, you know, what I've been taught and what it should be like. Avoid the stereotypes, the cultural stereotypes, as I mentioned before in my earlier example, you know, and the influences that can have on your decision making. And I think particularly those in sort of leadership positions, I think it's really important. I mean, I've sat around in boardrooms with leaders and have been open to discussions where they are really wanting to have an inclusive organisation, and they want to form those discussions. And yet, when I look around the boardroom, there's one other diverse person there. There's no diversity actually sitting on that boardroom that are actually being able to give those those views and those expressions to really inform change. So, you know, within yourselves as individuals and organisations, it's about what can you do as leaders and in your organisations to actually combat those biases and make the organisation more inclusive going forward. Next slide, please, Julie. Yeah, I've kind of jumped to my next slide straight away. But it's kind of like, you know, just acknowledging your own bias. I have them, we all have them. And think about yourself and the assumptions that you make may attract you to people. Challenge yourself, challenge your own assumptions and be willing to be proved wrong. Don't take offense if someone challenges your own, you know, your own expressions and stuff. Be willing to sort of listen to that and adapt. Listen and learn about people different from yourselves, you know, because I often think, you know, that's what makes us great. Learning about others, it can only be a positive thing to improve the way that we all live. And then most importantly, ask for feedback on your experiences from everyone, you know, and be willing to do things differently, I think is the main thing. Be willing to make that change as well. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, intersectionality. Yes, wow. Okay, moving on to my favourite subject. Okay, so I suppose generally when we think of minorities, we consider a specific box or a label, usually in the singular. So being Black, or being LGBTQ+, or being disabled, or being female, for example. But we need to break down those constructs. And because people don't often fit into one neat little box, so what is intersectionality? It's where somebody is part of a number of minority groups. So, for example, gay plus being disabled plus being female. Yeah, or being Black and trans and part of a faith community. For example, myself, I'm female, I'm Black, I'm Christian, I also have a disability. Yeah, so intersectionality is a framework for understanding how social identities, such as those in the diagram we can see here, overlap and interact with one another, how this can impact people in the workplace and broader community. Intersectionality therefore considers identity as a whole. So a white straight man is still intersectional. However, the term intersectionality was created by Kimberly Crenshaw to specifically illustrate marginalized communities. We're not suggesting that we can be representative of all intersectionality identity time. What we must do is be aware of these varying intersecting identities and the additional barriers that people may face. Remember that people have lots of different elements and the makeup of who you are, and they could therefore experience discrimination on multiple levels. So this is where power comes in and privilege comes in, really, with intersectionality. I don't know if you want to add anything here, Julie.
Yeah, I think it's also important to note that some different types of your identities can also conflict with each other, which can make it really, really difficult. So, so I'm a Christian. I grew up going to church. I was in the church band until I was 16. But then when I was 16, I also realised that I was gay. This created in my mind a huge conflict, because I was told from, well, I assumed, probably more than it being fact, that I couldn't be a Christian and be gay at the same time. And this is one of the it was one of the hardest things about me coming out. It was one of the hardest things about my mum dealing with me coming out, which didn't actually go very well, partly because she needed to understand how it impacted on her faith. And it's the same with ethnicity and sexual orientation or gender identity as well. In some cultures it can be more acceptable or less acceptable. So yeah, we all have these different parts of us which can put added layers of discrimination, but then it can also cause conflict for yourself, and you can even be, in some cases, discriminated against by parts of your own communities, which can make it really harder. So it's really important to just be mindful of it. And also, as organisations, when you're looking at your data as well, try and look at it from an intersectional lens. So actually, that your Black colleagues may be experiencing this, and your female colleagues or women colleagues might be experiencing this. What is it like for your Black women colleagues? And make sure that you're not just looking at things sort of one-dimensionally, if that makes sense. The power and privilege part of it is really important. So I'm going to move on to what you can do. I'm conscious of time, so I'm hoping that we can get through this this exercise, because I think it's hopefully quite impactful, and can really showcase sort of our role where we've got privilege ourselves, and then how we can use that. So for this exercise, cameras are optional. Feel free to put your camera on or leave it off. Just a heads up though, there'll be some questions. I'm going to be running through a series of statements. Some of them might be quite personal, so if your camera's on, then people will see, but it's great to see people whilst they do this as well. So I want you to all put your hands out in front of you like this. I'm going to read out a series of statements. If the statement is true, keep your fingers raised, and if it's false, I want you to lower a finger. Hang on, I'm going to have to scroll whilst I'm doing this. I'm just going to get this up. Okay. So, I can go shopping alone most of the time, confident that I won't be followed or harassed by security. I can hold my partner's hand in public without having to look over my shoulder to check that it's safe. I've never been misgendered or referred to as the wrong pronoun. I can easily buy books, greeting cards, dolls, children's magazines featuring people who look broadly like me or like my children. I've never felt like I've had to change my accent in order to be respected or socially accepted. I can walk home at night without fear of being attacked. I can talk openly about my mental health without worrying about or appearing weak to my friends. My parents or my carers could afford to pay for my school meals as a child. The majority of homes I go into accommodate my physical needs. And I've never felt that having children may have an impact on my career. So feel free to put in the chat. It's interesting, I can see a few faces there, how many hands we have got remaining. If you feel comfortable to do so, please drop it in the chat. And three left. I think I had 4. I'm seeing a few with 2 hands up there. So what do these fingers represent? So basically, the fingers represent our privilege. A privilege is basically a right or an advantage that's given to a certain group of people based upon how they're treated in society. Basically, it's often stems from. Sorry, I've lost my screen. I'm going to move on to the next one. So it's important. So it's a special right or advantage or immunity that's granted or available to a particular person or group. So many people who have privilege often don't even realise they've got it or that a problem exists. So just because something isn't a problem to you personally can sometimes make you assume that it's not a problem at all. It's really important to note that there's nothing actually wrong with having privilege. Again, we all have it at some point and we can all lose it very easily. The images on here, the wheel of privilege or wheel of power, is a really useful way of tracking, again, your own privilege and the areas that you do have it and the areas that you don't. We can also lose it very easily as well. So we might have it 1 second and then something will change. It might be, changes in law, it might be changes in environment, and we can lose that privilege straight away. We often can't help the privilege we've got. It's often something that we're born with, but not always. But what's really, really important is what we do with it. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with us having privilege. It actually puts you in a powerful position, but it's how you use that privilege that really matters. I'll hand over to Michelle.
Michelle, you're on mute.
Are you stuck? Steph, can we unmute people ourselves?
I think I can unmute them. Let me see.
Michelle, you're on mute. Can you come off?
I think she's stuck.
Right, okay.
Sorry, I was just stuck. It wouldn't do it just now. I'm back now. Sorry about that. I do apologise. I am conscious of time, so I'll go through these really, really quickly. We wanted to talk about allyship, and I think we all saw the images last year when George Floyd was murdered, and I think for me it was one of the most powerful images I've seen when people went out and marched, and it was a true example of allyship that was demonstrated there. I think I recall having conversations with colleagues, with friends, around never seeing something like that before in our lifetimes, where all black, white, brown, you name it, were out in protest because of the injustice that had been done. So when we talk about allyship, it's about what can you do, to prevent these people being marginalized and combat people's needs. It's us all working together to achieve a positive outcome. Yeah. So if we move on to the next slide for me, please, Julie. Thank you. So we talked about we all have our privilege in some way. It's about us using that privilege as well where we can. So, Liv, I love this analogy, Liv. It's about, being an ally, and that's broken down into really listening. So listening to what people are saying around you. What are the difficulties people are experiencing? How can you aid in that? What influencing skills do you have? Can you bring to the table around your peers that you work with, your colleagues that you work with, your family that you interact with, and just raising visibility of it. We're doing that right now today, raising visibility of the message that we want to get out there. And then again, most important, educating and empowering. Yeah, so empowering others to do and achieve things as well. So the Liv analogy is fantastic. It's about doing something, in any way that you can to create a more inclusive society, really. So is there anything you wanted to add on that, Julie?
No, I think no, you've explained it brilliantly. I think the visibility point is also really, really important. A lot of the times, people can assume the worst unless they know for a fact. So I might automatically be worried about saying girlfriend or referring to my partner as she in front of somebody that I don't know, because I'll automatically assume that they're probably, going to react badly to it. So actually, there's some things, being visible, talking about it, sharing stuff on social media, wearing a lanyard, at work, that sort of demonstrates your support for certain groups. It actually really does have a massive impact, and it's quite a simple thing to do from your points, but all of those points are really, really relevant and really important. And I like that the sentence at the end, that ally should be is a verb and not a noun. It's not just something that you say you are, it's something that you do. So it definitely involves action. That's it, and that's it from us. I'm conscious of time. We've gone 1 minute over with no time for questions, but I'm happy to stay on if anybody else wants to sort of stay and ask any questions. Sue, I'll hand back over to you, shall I?
Yeah, well, I'm sort of, people are saying, can they have the slides, which I'm sure we're going to be able to let them have. So I think we've obviously got everyone's details, but if people specifically want the slides, if you let me or Emma, who sent you the invitation, know, we'll get the slides to you. But I think if there's anyone, we're right on the second. Clearly, it's a Friday afternoon. Some people will probably want to go now and fine. But if there are things that people want to ask now, if they want to put their hand up and ask questions, I'm sure that Julie and Michelle will be very happy to take them. And thanks very much, Julie and Michelle, indeed. Obviously, I've seen that before, but really, really helpful. And I think lots and lots and lots of questions and things coming up there, which I think people are going to want to comment on. So, oh, and there's a little somebody clapping there. I've still not really worked out all the technology on this stuff. Is there stuff now that people want to ask now while we're all here together? No, we kept everyone happy.
So just to say thank you so much. We both really enjoyed that, and we would love to see the slides if we may. So
Yeah.
thank you to Julie and Michelle, and for the rest of you for organising it.
And Lara, I don't even need to ask who you are because I immediately know. Anyone
Thank
else?
you.
As I say, but if people let either Emma or I know who want the slides, we make sure that you get them. Anybody else?
Has there been anything in the chat as we've gone on, Steph, or is it just mostly?
No. I think people were really sort of concentrating on you. So I'll write down who we're getting here. Yeah, heavens above.
Lots. And apologies for the technical glitches as well, but yeah, I'm more than happy for the slides to be shared and